Good evening, everybody. It's glad to be with you once again for our Wednesday night classes. I get to do 4 classes in a row, which is really cool. We're going to be talking about solitude and silence. And this is a difficult kind of a concept because we always want to be busy and around everybody and talking with other people and stuff, and that's great. That has to be part of our life. But what we're going to see in many of these passages we'll look at is that we need to have also some time to really contemplate and to learn and to put everything into our heart of what we're doing as a Christian. And I don't want to say we need to turn into monks or something like that, and we never talk to other people, or and a lot of times what we have is a lot of fear of silence and a fear of being alone, and you kind of are addicted to talking and being on your phone and doing all of those kind of things. It becomes an addiction. And so what we're going to talk about is why it's good for us to have some time of solitude and have some time of silence. And we're going to learn that this was a part of Jesus' life. It was a part of Paul's life. It has been talked about all through the scriptures, but it's not something that we really actually think about very much in our own lives. And we don't want to be monks. We don't want to run away from civilization. We don't want to be a weirdo. We just want to learn deeper about how to connect with God. And I'll give a lot of different illustrations as we go on. We'll do different parts of what we're going to do. But I want to start back even in Jesus' childhood. Well, that's kind of interesting. His first 30 years. So let's look at Luke chapter 2, 46 through 47. And this is when he was young. His family came to Jerusalem. Let me read this here. After 3 days, his parents, they found him in the temple courts. They didn't know where he was. And so they had gone 3 days out into the desert. They didn't know where he was, and so they looked for him. They found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. I mean, this is remarkable. He's probably between 8 years old or 12 years old. That's how old he was. Obviously, Jesus had been reading the Bible. Jesus had, even as a child, had his own questions. It wasn't just somebody giving him the questions. A lot of times we don't even know what the questions are. Jesus, as a child, had probably been at the synagogue. He had been with the priests. He'd been with other people who had helped him to learn to read, and he read on his own for a long, long time. He was still just a kid. He wasn't even the carpenter yet. And so it's interesting to see that kind of passion that he got so caught up with asking questions, and then they would ask him and he would answer the questions. He got so caught up with it, it lasted 3 days before his parents even came back to try and find him. 3 days. Just a kid. It's amazing. I think a lot of times we're just not that curious. We know, okay, I got baptized, I need to go to church, I better go to the meetings, I need to pray every so often. Boom. Does it go very much further than that in your life? Are you looking deeper of what in the world are we doing being Christians? Who is it that this God that we're following? We have to have a kind of a sense in our heart that I want to find some more answers, and I want to have a deeper connection with God. And if Jesus was doing that even as a child, why can't we, as maybe we've been Christians many, many years. Many of us have been Christians many years, and we haven't really dug deep. But I want us to think a little bit about how we can spend some time learning more about God. And I'm not going to say that this is going to be easy. I'm going to challenge you in these 4 weeks to do some things that you really don't want to do. I'm sure. This is not going to, oh, wow, Dan, you told me to do that. I've done that 3 times already this week. No, you haven't. Or maybe you probably haven't. But I really do challenge us to really think a little bit deeper and let ourselves learn how to get a deeper relationship with God. Well, the next one I want to look at is in Matthew chapter 4, the first verse. He says, after his baptism of John the baptizer, he was baptized, and it says, then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. So, if we want a time of solitude and silence, this is what we've got right here. He got baptized with John. Everybody was happy. You know, people didn't even realize what was going on right then. But he didn't just say, okay, time for my ministry. Time for me to go. Instead, John, let me have all your guys, and I'll take them, and I'll go teach them. He went off into the desert, not for a day, not for a weekend, not for 3 or 4 days, but 40 days. He was led in the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And that's a big deal. 40 days, no people around there. He was talking to God. He was understanding who he was. He was thinking about what this next 3.5 years is going to cost him. He was God, but he had a choice of what he was going to do. And so he went out there. And it's interesting here in Matthew 4, it says, he was taken into the wilderness to be tempted. Now, I don't necessarily want to just go somewhere so I can be tempted. That's not really what we want to do. But this is what Satan wants to do all the time in your life. He wants to take you down. He wants to push your buttons, the things that are going to make you curse God and curse people and to just be angry. And this is what Satan was wanting to do. I mean, he went every angle he could think. And then in verse 2 and 3 in Matthew 4, it says, after fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. Whoa! He was hungry 40 days and 40 nights. Okay, that's quite of a fast. The tempter came to him and said, if you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread. And of course, we know the rest of the story. You know, he doesn't do that kind of a thing, and he gets rid of Satan. Satan just wants to get in there in any way that he can. But what Jesus was doing is he was getting even stronger at that point. And I think there's another passage that here it says he did these 2 or 3 different things. He took him up on top of the steeple, and then these 3 temptations. But in Hebrews 4:15, this is even broader of what happened to Jesus. He says, for we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. Now, I don't even understand that. I mean, there's a lot of ways to sin. There's a lot of horrible things that we can be tempted in. And of course, those three that were in the desert that actually were written down. Now, those were a few things. But here in Hebrews 4, the writer says, he was been tempted in every way just as we have been tempted. Now, one of the interesting things about this, Jesus going to the wilderness, and then it's written down in the Bible. Now, let me ask you a question. Who was with Jesus in the wilderness to know what he was tempted about? Anybody got an answer to that? It's got to be Jesus. There wasn't anybody there going, wow, look what Satan is doing to Jesus. I wouldn't do it to me or anything else like this. What I figured out is as Jesus brought his disciples together, he told them about how he was tempted. Think about those three temptations. I can give you all the every country in the world. You can be a master of everything. All of these things. Jesus told them about that, and I'm sure he said, "Man, this was tough stuff. This was difficult." And maybe there was way more, because the Hebrews writer says, man, he's been tested all kinds of things that we've been tested about. And so Jesus had the relationship with God that he could say no. So he knew that if I go down this road, it's over. There is no salvation for the rest of the world. If I go down this road, everybody dies. And I do have a choice. Sometimes we think, well, Jesus doesn't have a choice. He's God. Yes, he was human, and that is what this passage says. But we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not do it. For us, we're tempted and we do it. We have got to learn to be more like Jesus. And that 40 days out there, right before his ministry started, it was a 3.5-year ministry, and the whole time he knew what's on the end of this thing. He says, it's going to be death. This is where I'm going. And even when he told the disciples, okay, we're going to go up there and the Son of Man is going to die, they didn't have an idea about that. They thought, well, you're the Son of God. You're not going to be able to be killed. They didn't understand. But Jesus understood. And he had to have that depth of heart and depth of relationship with God to do everything that he did. And I think for us, and I want us to just kind of look at our lives for just a minute. And I think most of us know the Bible. We read the Bible. We looked at the Bible. That's how we became Christians. But do we really love the Scriptures? The Old Testament and the New Testament. The Torah over here, the New Testament over here. Can we really put ourselves into that? And a lot of times we're lazy because you say, well, I've read that before. I've seen that before. Man, I'm so busy, and I got to watch another show. I got to do this. I got to do that. Are we really searching the Scriptures to understand what God is trying to do with us? And when Jesus, that 30 years before he actually, came out and was baptized, and then these temptations, 30 years, he grew up as a man. He was a carpenter. He worked hard. I'm sure he made wonderful pieces of whatever it was he was a carpenter of. And I'm sure there were people who wanted him to marry their daughters, and that didn't happen. It's just normal life. The temptations were all there, but he said no. And I think part of what he said no because of is that he studied the Scriptures. He knew the Scriptures. It's not like it was already in his head. He had to read it. He was a human. He had to read it. He had to learn it. He had to see it. And that's why, even as a young child, he was up there asking questions. You think, well, but he's the Son of God. He ought to already know. No, he had to learn it. And we need to have this kind of sense that how long am I going to sit down and read my Bible? Or even listen to my Bible? Or ask questions of my Bible? And how can I give some time to actually learning what God is trying to say? I'm not saying we need to be scholars. I'm just saying it's got to get into here. And many of us have been Christians for 10, 20, 30 years, in a long time. And maybe you haven't even read Zechariah. And you don't know much about Hosea. And you don't know a lot of things that are in the Old Testament that actually this was Jesus' Bible. This is what he was studying about. And even as we get into the New Testament, sometimes we just fly over it without really drinking it in. We've got to have some time to really pull into God. And we need to, not all of us memorize. I'm not a good memorizer, but memorizing scriptures is great. But let me say this caveat here. You can memorize something and not live it out. You can quote it, but are you doing it? So you can have some memorization. It's great. But why are you memorizing this? Are you going to put it into practice in your life? And we need to look at what's going on in our life. And we have good jobs. We do good things for other people. And we're learning about God. But are we excellent? Are we pouring ourselves into these kinds of things? Well, Jesus didn't tell us to go 40 days into a desert when we get baptized. He didn't tell us to do that. But interestingly, there was one that did do that, and that's the Apostle Paul. Now remember, the Apostle Paul was Saul first, and he was the enemy of the Christians. He was wanting to kill and was killing the Christians. And then in the desert road, God appeared to him and he became a Christian. And, here was the enemy of the church. He was trying to destroy the church. And you think about, what are the other Christians going to do about this guy that they know of him as Saul, the one who's going to kill us? Now he got baptized. Is he just kind of coming in here till he can find out what was he going to do? So Paul was kind of a pariah, even though he was a Christian. And I think he said, okay, after some different things that he had done with Barnabas and stuff like this, he says, well, I'm going to just take some time. And it says that he went for 3 years into the desert alone. Now that's really interesting. And when he came back out, he actually, Barnabas found him again, and he had gone to Tarsus, but Barnabas found him, and they started missionaries. But it's interesting. He got baptized. The Christians didn't really trust him, and he went for 3 years to go be alone, silence and solitude. And it's interesting because Jesus went there for 3 years, or for times, and those 40 days. But 3 years with God, I'm not sure any of us could really do that. And he really became one of the greatest champions. His role was different than Peter's role. Peter was helping the Jews and making all of this happen. But Paul had a different type of a look. Even though he was so against the Gentiles, somehow his heart changed. And he said, well, I'm going to go to these people that the Jews don't want to go to. So I think times alone with God can really change you. No matter what you've ever done in the past, it can change you completely. It'll change the way you look at everything. And God wants to see you change. He wants to see you grow. So in this series, we're going to talk about some things that not you do every day, but you have to learn to do. And we'll talk about those in the next ones. And so let's just remember that Jesus, he himself was very curious. He was looking, he was seeing, even as a child. And let us be those kind of childs that are asking a lot of questions and learning as much as we possibly can. Okay, that's enough for tonight. Thank you. Have a good night.